everybody. Welcome back to Educate Me or Help Educate Me. It's a podcast where I bring on people that I think are in the industry or in an industry that we need to know more about. Today's day and age, podcasting and managing your video content is huge in this world. And I love it. That's why I got into it. And this guy, he's going to outclass me. Don't forget, because, you know, these British guys, I'm just one guy that, high school graduate, college school drunk out, and that's kind of who I am. So we're going to learn all about the podcasting industry and find it out. So it is with my pleasure to introduce this gent on the show today, and James Burtt. Did I say that right, James?
You said it right. It's a good start.
So James
I could see you working out. You had to say the surname. You were thinking,
yep,
how can I skirt around this? But you couldn't.
I had to make sure I said it right. I didn't want to say burnt or bunt but it's James Burtt. He's out of the UK. He's got a very large podcast broadcasting system over there. Does an amazing job. Great speaker. I've listened to him a bunch of times on Clubhouse. I've listened to about 20 of his podcasts. Great interviews. I think he does. So I think it's going to be a great one for us today to learn a little bit more about this industry, how it works. But James is the co-founder of Phonic Media, the teachings of exploding your business through the power of audio, the managing director of the Ultimate Podcast Group. They're a full-service production company that helps businesses, influencers, experts, brand builders, and they create an impactful ROI driving branded audio shows. The host of Building the Brand podcast. That's where I followed him at. If you guys get a chance, go out there, check it out. He's got a lot of funny interviews, and it's fantastic. I met James through Clubhouse, and this is where you can hear the truth of people talking through their voice. It's a very, very powerful tool. It's kind of what drew me to him, and this is why I brought him on the show today, because I like earnest sincerity and people who wear their words on their sleeve. That's the best part about life. If you always tell the truth, you never have to remember what you say. So I think with further ado, let's get into this. James, man, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, and thank you as well, inadvertently and accidentally, for reminding me of my dear dad, who's sadly no longer with us. But he used to say that all the time, because I used to tell loads of fibs when I was a kid, and he was "Be sure your sins will catch you out, young man." And the other thing he would say to me is, "If you always tell the truth, you never have to remember what you said." And I haven't heard that for about 30 years, so that was a lovely walk down memory lane.
Oh yeah, no, I got into that's one of my sponsors. When I got sober 26 years ago, that was one of his driving points, because, you know, he always told me, "McCarty, you're full of shit. Quit lying to people. Quit telling these stories. Just tell the truth. It's a lot funnier and it's a lot more believable."
Yeah, 100%. And it's never a truer word was said. I have to admit, as a kid, I guess all kids go through that, and I've probably got my own kids are going through it themselves now with me. But you never wanted to admit that your dad was right, and he'd come up with these pearls of wisdom. He'd be like, stuff like that about lying. What was some of his other ones? You have two ears and one mouth. I suggest you use them in that ratio, young man, and all this sort of stuff. And at the time, I was like, this guy don't know nothing about life. And now, 30 years later, I'm like, God, he was actually quite clever. To be fair, he was actually quite astute.
Oh yeah, we never entrust our fathers to know exactly what we're doing, because when we turn 16 and we go to age 25, we already know everything. And then when we hit 25 to 35, we learn that, you know what, he might be partially right. And then, you know, as I hit 45 to 50 and then I lost my dad, I realized that son of a bitch was right about everything, and now I really miss him.
Yeah, I'm the same. Unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was 26, so I never really got to be. That sounds like a weird thing. I was never really a grown up while my dad was around, because he was very poorly for the last 5 years of his life. So I was away being a holiday rep at 21, and all I cared about was drinking and chasing women, and the rest of my time I wasted.
Right.
And then when he got poorly, I left being a holiday rep and I went back home. So I was working in Cyprus. I went back home to sort of be with him. And yes, I was never like, I didn't have my own kids while he was around. I wasn't married when he was around, sadly. I think we just bought our first house. So he saw us move into our first little flat, but that was about it. But yeah, that's one of my big regrets. You can't really have regrets, and you also can't speed up the time, or you can't stop the flow of time. But I'd love to sit down as a dad now, as a father, and sit and have a conversation with, you get asked that all the time, like, who are the 3 people that you'd love to bring to your fantasy dinner party? Like, I'd quite happily swap every chair at that party to have 10 minutes sat with my dad.
Oh yeah.
But the wisdom, the naivety of youth and the wisdom of age, unfortunately, eluded us at 2 different times of our lives.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, me and I lost my brother in January of this year, and after my dad passed away in 2016, me and him became really, really close. There's 8 years between us, and the stories me and him would tell about each other and tell about what dad used to do for each one of us. It's just absolutely astounding. There's a lot of stories I didn't even know about because there's so many years between me and my brother. There's 8 years between us, so we were basically our own kids in fact, because my mom had, I think, 4 miscarriages between the 2 of us. So during that period, things happened, and then he was out of the house by the time I became old enough to figure out that a brother's a pretty cool thing to have, and everything else, and then 35 years later we become super close friends, and one of the reasons why I moved down to Tennessee was to be closer to him. And
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, moved about 15 minutes from him, and we just hung out. We both have similar aspects, being brought up by our dad. We both love to woodwork and build shit and work in the yard, and we work hard and we play hard. And unfortunately the alcoholism got me early on, and got me early age, but I quit drinking, and he kept on drinking, but it is what it is. So
yeah, I'm so we've got a lot of stuff in common then. So I'm a non-drinker as well. I'm also someone who doesn't drink. I'm teetotal. I didn't stop drinking because of sort of an addiction challenge, but I actually, as a 29-year-old guy, got my first taste of gout. I don't know if gout is a thing over there, or whether it's just a language that we use here in the UK. But yeah, that stopped me and my drinking in my tracks.
Yeah,
that was game over for me as well.
My dad had it for a little while too. It slowed his drinking down. Didn't stop it, but it slowed it down quite a bit. But we all go through the misconceptions. People say that I'm just a quitter because I quit drinking, and I said it doesn't have anything to do with quitting. If I could just still drink normal today, I still would, but I just got tired of going to jail.
Yeah, and do you know what? Here's a really interesting thing. So actually, I read something in a book once, and it changed my perception on quitting, full stop. And it was a book. I used to smoke as well when I was younger, and I smoked until about 12 years ago now. So I smoked well into my sort of 20s. And I started when I was like 13, like classic smoking story, like behind the bike sheds and all that sort of stuff. I used to love a cigarette. I used to love a drink. Didn't care it was bad for me, because at that age, like mid-20s, you think that, you're invincible. It's not until you see someone who you love actually really poorly, you're like, oh, actually, we are here for quite a short period of time, aren't we? And so I started giving up smoking. And that was the thing. I was reading this book called Alan Carr's Easy Ways to Give Up Smoking. And I talked about quitting. And it said in the book about the difference between quitting and it said, oh, stop using the term giving up smoking. You're not giving up anything. You're giving yourself more life. So stop using that phrase. You're stopping. And there's a difference between stopping and giving up. And there's also a difference between stopping and quitting. Now, I did a podcast episode with someone recently. I had a financially very successful company a few years ago, but it just made me miserable. I was working with awful human beings and doing something I didn't enjoy doing. And so I stopped. I didn't quit. I didn't give it up. I stopped. I chose to stop. And when I had a podcast interview with about that business with someone a few months ago. They're like, how do you stop a business when it's making so much money, when it's got so much traction, when it's got so much momentum, it's moving forwards? And again, I know a lot of your listeners will probably have heard, like multi-millionaire stories of, the time I turned away my first £1 million. Like, let me tell you, I'm not in that position to be sort of like turning down the millions of quid, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But it was the right thing to do. And the mindset towards it was, I'm not quitting. I'm not giving anything up. I'm just stopping. And I think there's a real key to knowing the difference between those things, for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a big difference between stopping and quitting. I've got friends that just stopped, and then like I said, my situation was probably a little bit different. I went through all the trials and tribulations, like to get DUIs and like to get into trouble when I was drinking, and I was looking at quite a bit of prison time the very last time I got in trouble. Luckily, great lawyer, and my father, being who he was, knew quite a few people in the city area, so kind of went in my favor. So I ended up doing about 364 days in county jail, which is basically day camp. And other than that, I just basically bucked up and went into AA and met my two best friends I have until today. We've been best friends since I walked into those doors 26 years ago. And it's just an amazing feeling because, back then, your drinking friends are just that. They're only there to have a drink with you and spar with you at the bar. And true friends are there for you when you call and need anything that you need. And that's the biggest difference I think I found out in my life is the difference between a true friend and a friend.
Yeah, I've been very lucky because I don't have like a big in the UK we've got quite a big drinking culture.
Yeah.
It's been hardwired into us. You work Monday to Friday. You used to have it like at the docks and stuff. You get your pay packet on a Friday, and then the sort of the bar would be the biggest street between like the dock and like where everybody lived. And you basically, a lot of like in certain, especially in northern cities in the UK, it's a place in particular called Hartlepool. And a mate of mine actually remembers this happening, that the guys would get off work at 3 o'clock on a Friday and the wives would be there to take their pay packets to give them the money to go out drinking that night and take the rest for the housekeeping and looking after the family, or else they would literally drink their week's worth of wages before they got home on a Friday night. And we've got that as a culture, like a drinking culture, and football is or soccer, as you guys would call it, is a big sort of like drinking thing. But I think, I don't know whether it's because of the lens through which I'm seeing the world now, but I see a lot less like drinking now, a lot less drinking culture. Like the coffee culture here is getting a lot bigger. You'll see, cafes and coffee shops are open till 10 o'clock at night, whereas maybe it's just the lens that I'm seeing stuff through, because before all I would see was the pub.
Right.
But other than sort of the appeal of like a cozy British pub in the countryside, which I still love to go to, just have an alcohol-free beer instead. I don't see that much of it anymore. That's the other thing as well. I know we've gone off on a weird tangent, but the non-alcoholic beers are fantastic over here now. We've got some really, really good brands. Would you have a non-alcoholic beer, or is that like
early on in my sobriety, I used to drink 2 or 3 of them, but now I don't even have the taste for it anymore.
Right.
I drink my Diet Coke and my waters and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
So I don't even, I know if I have one, it's not going to stop at one. I'm going to have them all. I'm going to drink until there's no more, till the brewery stop making it. And so it's just one of those things that I'm okay with. So it doesn't bother me anymore. I can hang with the best of them that are out there drinking and doing whatever. It doesn't bother me what you do. It's what I do that makes the difference.
Yeah, very good way of looking at it. Well, I'm very sorry for any of your listeners who tuned in hoping to get branding or podcast expertise, because we talked about sobriety, gout, and the passing away of close family so far. So went off on a bit of a tangent there, Doug.
That's all right.
So the beauty of podcasting, though, there's no rules. There's no rules of this.
No, there isn't. It's just us going at it, and
exactly.
We figure things out and talk about it and see how it goes. But what's the one question, or there's one question I always ask all my guests: what's the one thing that everybody out there, even your listeners or my listeners, obviously my listeners wouldn't know anything about it, but what's the one thing your listeners don't know about James?
The one things that listeners don't know. How would I phrase this in the right way? I think the one thing that would surprise people is that I take a lot of stuff far too serious. So I come across, whether you've heard my content or, you know, on podcasts or Clubhouse or whatever, I come across as quite an easy come, easy go kind of guy. But I think I take lots of stuff very, very seriously, probably to my own detriment, to be fair. And I think on my deathbed, that'll be one of my regrets will be that I took stuff so seriously. But the weird thing is I know that even now, but I will still probably not deal with that until further down the line, if that makes sense, which is a bit of a bizarre thing. But yeah, I think it's very easy to for me to be like, I come across very lighthearted, but I'm quite serious. And I think I cover that well. But I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. Like, I take stuff too serious, if that makes sense.
Like internally, or you jest about it on the outside, but internally you're like, fuck, I need to say that a different way because I mean it different.
On the inside, I think I take stuff. Even when I was a holiday rep, right? You know, we used to have. I used to work on a team of 5 of us, and the girls in the team. There's 4 girls and me. Good odds, but they always used to be late for work, and it used to really piss me off. Like,
yeah.
Would wind me up no end. But now looking back at it, it's like, did it really matter? I don't think it even really mattered, to be honest. But even at the time, there was a 21-year-old holiday rep, just having a laugh, just having fun, in a holiday resort in Spain, living the dream. And I just used to get really annoyed about, like, they would always be late. It's like, chill out, man. I don't think it actually matters that much.
All right, James, what's going on the so what got you into podcasting and the video audio game, as they call it? Because for me, I got into it I recently retired from the company that I had that I sold. And that's what got me into this whole YouTube and podcasting situation, because I just find it fascinating that you can record audio, put it on video, and then people start to watch it. My quality, like I said, this is probably my 12th podcast so far. I bought the equipment. I don't know how to run it. I'm learning how to do it. And I'm setting things up. My other studio has got all the right mics and all that kind of stuff. This is my portable studio that I've got set up. I think it's working all right. The only part about it that I hate is the editing, and I just can't stand it so much. So I've hired an editor now, and hopefully things get a little bit better. But if you go through one of my other YouTube channels, my DJM Designs is where I build furniture and build miscellaneous stuff in the shop, and it's horrible. I don't even want to watch it myself.
Everyone's first rodeo into the content space is horrible, by the way. So just to sort of placate you a little bit and to put your listeners at ease, if every time everyone's a newbie at this at some point, right? It doesn't matter how much support you've got, what level of team you've got behind you. It's always horrible to start with. If I go back to episode number 1, I listen back and I cringe. It's like, it's over the top, gobby, Cockney, London, like, oh yes, what we're going to talk about. And I'm like, oh mate, who's this like knobhead? But it gets easier, and it's like with anything, especially like the gym. It's reps and sets. Reps and sets is the only way that you get better. You refine your brand message by the more that you say it. You get stuff right, you get stuff wrong. You put out content that's not aligned and it looks rubbish, and you put out podcast episodes that aren't actually that good, and you do YouTube and you cover art's crap and all the rest of it. Now, of course, we all strive for perfection as much as possible, but for me, the aim of the game is start now and get perfect later. Because if you waited to get perfect before you get going, you would still be waiting, I would still be waiting, we'd all still be waiting. And the content game really does reward consistency and persistence, which is great. As I say, when you asked how I got into it, I was basically a failed radio presenter. That's how I got my start. So in 2010, I worked for an online not online, a digital radio station in the UK. So these big fancy studios up in Newcastle, which is like 4 hours away from my house, which to you guys in the States is like, oh yeah, that's fine. It's just around the corner. Not in the UK. That's like the other side of the earth, effectively, if it's 4 hours away. So I would travel up to this radio station every 2 weeks. I'd go and do recording sessions. And then they brought in a guy who used to head up one of the biggest radio stations in the UK, BBC Radio 1. It was where he used to work. And he basically sacked everybody. And he was known as the Hatchet, which was a nickname that he still used for himself, just to give you an idea of what the guy's like, just to give you a sort of a benchmark of what he's like as a human. And so he came into the radio station. He said, we're going to make some sweeping changes. And I said to my mate, I was doing a show with us, like, this is good for us. I reckon we're in here. And then he phoned me the next day. He said, do you remember those sweeping changes I was talking about yesterday? Well, the first one is I'm sacking you and your mate. He said, I just think you're awful. And I was like, great. Sure, thanks, pal. So then I sat on the fence from I was a bit wounded. I sort of went off to lick my wounds. I still worked around the broadcast space. I was in charge of a network that put sponsorship and promotions onto 160 radio stations around the UK. So that was what I was doing for a job, but I still wanted to get back onto the radio. And then in 2012, I discovered podcasts. I was like, wow, what is this thing? It's like radio, but your own radio station. You don't have to have a license. You don't, because I've done like internet radio and community radio and, radio in the back end of a church hall and all sorts of stuff just to try and keep my hand in. And then when I found podcasting, I was like, well, this is all the best bits of broadcast, but without the rules, the regulations, having to cut away to music at a certain time, or having to play the news at a certain time, or having to do crap weather reports, which nobody frankly cares about. Like, look outside your window. Oh, it's raining. Well, of course it is. Look out your window. You can see it. And I was like, so this is brilliant. But still, that was 2012. And it still took me 5 years to get off the fence. And now when I look back at it retrospectively, I think maybe that sacking from the radio station hurt me a bit more than I realized at the time. And because I put a lot of my identity was that I wanted to be on the radio, I wanted to be around broadcast. And by the time I got to sort of 2017 with the podcasting, I was kind of like giving up on that dream. And then I was like, why don't I do this? Like, podcasting is perfectly suited to my skill set. So I launched, and I just learned a strategy and set of tactics that I thought would work, because I'd worked with big brands prior to being on the radio. I was basically a PR guy, so I'd help brands to get on the radio. That's how I got started in media in the first place. I'd worked with like BMW and Nintendo and Xbox and all these huge companies. So it's like, well, if I took what I did for them as a company, I did that for myself with my podcast, I reckon this would get a bit of traction. And it did. So the day that I launched, Tim Ferriss was number 1, Gary Vee was number 3, and I was sat in between them like the meat of an influencer sandwich at number 2 of the business chart. So I had the second biggest business podcast in the United Kingdom. I had no following, no mailing list, no paid for ads. I didn't even have a website of my own, no nothing. I just thought that you could do it by yourself if you'd done it in the right way, and I proved that you could. But to your point, it still took me being sacked in 2010, finding podcasts in 2012, and still waiting half a decade to get launched in 2017. I think now, I look back and think, what if I'd have just jumped in 2012? I mean, I'd be a gazillionaire. Me and you wouldn't be having this conversation, because I'd be on my yacht parked up next to Conor McGregor in Maritz or something like that. But you can't live your life looking in the rearview mirror, I guess. But yeah, so for me, the reason I tell that to people is that people say, oh, when should I start? Like, the best time is yesterday. The next best time is today. And if you can't do today, then start tomorrow. But whatever you do, just get rolling, just get moving. Because like you said, with your woodwork channel and all the rest of you, like, oh, it looks horrible, but it will get better. It will improve. You'll work out your style and your format and what fits with you. But you're never going to do that theoretically without jumping in and getting your feet wet.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating how much you can do. I think over 20 videos. Now I started off with basically a Hero 7 video camera, and now I've got 2 DSLRs and a couple of nice cameras, and now I'm setting things up. It takes me longer to set shit up than it does to goddamn make the product. That's the other thing that I'm learning is I think these stupid cameras are teaching me patience, and it's absolutely phenomenal and fun in retrospect, but the editing just kills me, because I'm 53. I didn't grow up with the internet. It didn't come out until I was 22. So it's not that the internet isn't that old if we look back at it. So, and
I've got to say that I've got so much respect for someone like you who's, retired because you sold a company. You've got, like 2 places that you live, half the time, in one place because of family commitments, and then the other half of the time, other family commitments to be near your brother. And at 53, to be willing and able and desiring to pick up new skills and all the rest. Because look, not to say that you're long in the tooth, but a lot of people by, sort of having sold out a company and retired would be like, well, I'm good, whatever. But to have that thirst for learning and to, you going, oh, YouTube, I think is just brilliant. I get so much. I just think that's brilliant. I just think it's fantastic to have that enthusiasm and that zest for learning new information.
yeah, it's just so much fun. But I mean, just, I went down the rabbit hole for 6 months to almost a year to figure out, okay, why do people watch what they watch? And it's not what I just had to learn that it's not what I want to produce. It's what other people are interested in being produced. So that's kind of what I'm taking from all the, I built this big old shop down in Tennessee, and now I've got all the woodworking tools and everything. It's nothing fancy, but it's just fun, and I have the skills to be able to do this stuff. Now I'm learning the skills of videoing and doing all this. Like yesterday, I had camera issues building a fence in my around my pool, so I wanted to basically do that. So every time I get set up, it's 100 degrees down here, and the cameras weren't liking the heat, and so the batteries were burning out in like 40 minutes. So every time I had to keep changing batteries, and it was just torquing me off. And it's just one of those things you kind of go through. But you start getting the 2 camera setups, and it's really, really fun to kind of see it come together. And I'm really, really excited because I keep learning something new every single time I do something. And that's what I like, because that's the reason why I got into podcasting, because I love to learn how people do things.
The great thing with content these days as well, and this wasn't the case in 2012 when I first sort of like heard it or saw it or witnessed it, because I think I was on YouTube from like 2008, something like that, as a consumer of it, when it solely was like cat videos and random brilliant pieces of music that popped out of nowhere. But these days, what they call the gig economy is so strong now that you really can. So for example, you said about 3 or 4 times now, I hate doing the editing. Well, for me, I'll be looking at you have to do the filming of it. You have to do the recording of it. You've got to be in front of it, but you don't have to edit it. And you could quite easily farm that out to somebody for not a lot of dough. And again, as a podcast agency owner, we are not the most expensive game in town, but we're definitely not the cheapest game in town either. We're probably somewhere on the expensive end of the middle because of our expertise and our credibility. But you can, to get started, and if you just need to do is to get started, you can go onto Fiverr, go onto Upwork, go onto all of these different places where you can get onlinejobs.ph. You get some amazingly talented people in these different locations. And just because of where they're located around the world, and because of how global finances and global currencies work, what is a fortune? I had, when I started out my agency, I had 2 full-time editors, and they were like $700 a piece. Now that's less than a fortnight of someone's salary in-house, plus you got the cost of being in London, if that makes sense. But just do what you got to do. It goes back to my point I made earlier: start now and get perfect later. But find those things. What are the bits of it's great to learn the stuff that you hate, even if you do hate it. Like, I don't really like editing audio, really. I mean, I do sometimes, especially for clients like, oh, that won't work. I'm like, I will make you work because it'll prove a point. But it was never really the thing I loved, sitting in front of a computer for hours and hours and hours. But I learned it. And now when you learn, and this is the other thing, when you learn something at such a deep level, then you can outsource it. Then you can give it away. Because what a lot of people do is that they don't like something, so they sack it off or they give it to somebody else to do, but you don't know it well enough to even give the job away properly. So for example, because you've done some of the editing, and because you've done some of the video, and because you've done some of the making some of the assets and writing some of the show notes and all this kind of stuff for your own podcast, yes, you might not like it. You might even hate it. Yes, it might not be your core competency, but at least now you can outsource that job effectively. Go, I know how long it took me. So if somebody comes back to you and says, oh, it's going to take me a day to edit the audio for your podcast, you know that that's bollocks because you did it in 2 hours. So why is it taking them a day? But you'd only know that from doing it. But there is that crossover point of doing the stuff, even if you don't like it, to learn it to a good enough level, but then give it to somebody else to go and do it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree, because I have to know what I want. So in order to get what I want, I have to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the key about it. Yeah, I went on Upwork, and I found a girl out of Texas, and she's the one that's starting to edit my stuff for me now, and we're feeling each other out, and it's so far it's working out great. She's got a lot of great insights, and she I just told her, I said, just be honest, and I don't care about hurting my feelings, because my feelings don't matter. I just want a quality product.
Yeah.
And she's really learned to get into that. So she says, this sucks, redo this, redo that. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. So that's what I like about it, because I just like people who wear their thoughts on their sleeve, because then there's no room for interpretation.
Yeah. And also, like I say, when you have to be really mindful of the outcome. I say this to people all the time. A lot of people come to me and say, oh, I want to start a podcast. I'm like, why? And they don't really know. You have to start with the end in mind. So like you say, to go through it, to know exactly what it is that you're trying to create, and then you can outsource it to somebody else. Then it becomes all the more easy to communicate effectively what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. And also, I think when you do that to other people, when you can articulate it well to somebody else, you actually also articulate it to yourself. So getting really clear to somebody else what you want, forces you to go, okay, well, I want the music's got to sound like this, and it's sort of like this show over here. You can pick the best bits of different shows, and then you can give a real concise brief to someone, and they can work off that brief. But I think it solidifies it for them and for you if you do it in the right way. And here's the other thing for anyone who's listening, because I know like you're doing Patreon and all kinds of stuff as well. You have got to. It doesn't have to be perfect to get started. What's the thing? You don't have to be perfect to get started, but you have to start to get perfect, or something along those lines. And also, but just allow yourself the time for this to get to where you want it to go. A lot of people want to run at 1,000 miles an hour, which is great, and I'm all about like taking massive action. And that's one of my key components of every aspect of life. But fundamentally, you're not going to go from a newbie startup podcaster with zero following to being in a position where you can, unless you're super rich for whatever reason, to where you can get a production team of 10 people in to make something that looks like a Joe Rogan. That takes time. You look back at Joe Rogan's a great example. Whether you love him or hate him, I'm sort of 50-50, depends on which day of the week it is or which way the wind's blowing. I think he's brilliant, to be honest. I think he's fantastic. I just have to say that because sometimes he rubs people up the wrong way, but I think he's great. But you look back to Joe Rogan, I think 12 years he's been doing that podcast. When people are like, oh my God, he gets 100 million downloads a month. Well, he does, but he's been in it 12 years. He started out with no following. He was just another random comic who just had something to say. He just happens to be a super smart, bright, articulate guy who's got a great viewpoint on the world. But he's, you look at the evolution of that was a ropey podcast to start with, and then it got a little bit better, and then he brought a producer in, and then they were cut to clips that was on the TV screen behind him, and then then they got the editing down, and the clips would be like on the screen, and then you could then they went to Spotify, give them 200 million bucks, whatever it was, and they went to this tunnel thing, and it looks all the more produced, but you don't get the end polished outcome without the steps in between. And a lot of people don't want to take the steps in between, but you got to do it. You can't shortcut it in a lot of instances.
It's progress, not perfection.
Yeah, great summary. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's the key to it all. And it's just, if you get up and face your fears, you have nowhere to go but up. And that's what I live by. Me being in the I've been at my bottom in my life, so I understand how that is. And once you learn to face those fears and learn to get off your ass and just do it, things go forward. And that's the best part about it. I can see progression in everything that I'm doing. That's the reason why this podcast, I love the aspect of interviewing people, finding out who they are, what they do, how they got there, friendships versus business friendships. What's your definition of friendships versus business friendships?
I think they can be, I don't know. That's a good one. I've been burnt by some business partners before, so I've got a very skewed viewpoint on just human beings in general, not just friends. I think the strongest business partnerships or the strongest business friendships start as business partnerships and then they blossom into friendships. I think the other way around is dangerous. So I've had friends who've become my business partners and it didn't work out. And now, you know, you mentioned earlier that we sort of got to know each other via Clubhouse. On Clubhouse, there's, you know, me and Ash and Paul, the three of us who sort of like co-founded the Winners Club, or were the curators of the Winners Club, as it's turned out to be. Now, I would not have been, I'll put it in a nice way. I wouldn't have been drawn to those guys as friends, very different characters from me, but through doing business, we've become really good friends. But it wouldn't have been the other way around, if that makes sense. Where, as I say, what you tend to find, I think, with business friendships is that you are business first and friends second, which doesn't devalue the relationship at all. In fact, I think if anything, it could really strengthen it. But when I've had it the other way around, where I've been friends first and then business partners, you tend to find, because again, you surround yourself with other people that are like you in most instances, you tend to be great at the same stuff and absolutely crap at the same stuff as well. So I used to have, my first ever sort of foray into self-employment was property. I was like, I'm going to buy these properties. I went to a property seminar. My wife was like, oh, don't buy anything. I was like, I'm not going to buy anything. I'm just going to go and listen. Anyway, an hour later, 1,500 quid spent, and I walked out with a bag and some books. I'm like, how to become a property millionaire. I was like, oh, whoops. Got completely sold down the rabbit hole on that one. But I went with my pal and he had a building company. So I was like, well, I've got the sort of the brand and the marketing side of it covered off. He's got the business, the building side of it, you know, covered off. What a great partnership. We were great at the same stuff and terrible at the same stuff. So we come to like finding deals, for example. We were both quite happily get on the phone and bash the phone to estate agent after estate agent. This is what we're looking for. This is what we're looking for. We could go and we could build rapport till the cows came home. We could go and get great relationship. We'd even get vendors who wanted to do deals with us because they just liked who we were as people. We had people who were like approaching us to go, you know, go and speak at networking events and all this kind of stuff. We were great at all that stuff. We had no back end. No back end. No one was doing the admin. No one was checking the deals. No one was tracking the deals. You know, in like, I think it was 6 months, we ended up buying one property. And it was such a bloody drawn out process that by the end of the refurb, we did it during a summer. So I was working in the music industry at this point. So I was working Monday to Friday from sort of like 10 a.m. in the morning to about midnight, because I was out most nights with bands. Then I'd get home from work on a Friday at midnight. I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. We'd drive to Sheffield, which is like 3 hours north of London. We'd then go and work all day Saturday, all day Sunday, then drive back Sunday night, get home for about 10 o'clock, have a quick shower, go to bed, and then start the whole thing again. And after 9 weeks of that, my pal, Dan, shout out to Dan Holbert, who's still my pal, but no longer my business partner, he was like, I don't think I want to do this. And I was like, no, Dan, I don't think I want to do it like this either. So I think it's if you can find people that you grow attached to through business, I think that's a very powerful thing. But I'd be super careful of doing it the other way around. Same with family. Same with family. I'm very fortunate. I've worked with my wife. We've run a couple of businesses together, and we had a property management company. It got up to 21 houses, 93 tenants. We managed probably 20 million pounds worth of property, doing 60, 70, 80,000 pounds a month in rent roll. It was quite not massive, but it was substantial enough, and we absolutely categorically hated it. We didn't like working together. We were working every night. We just had a baby. It really could have been the end of us, in all honesty, because again, we were, best pals and lovers first and business partners second. And sometimes you'll talk to your mate or you'll talk to your partner in a way that you wouldn't talk to somebody in a standard business environment. And I still get called out on it sometimes by my wife. She's like, would you talk to your other marketing people? Like, she still does a lot of our marketing. Would you speak to other marketing people like that? I was like, probably not. She's like, well, fine. Don't talk to me like that either. So, it's definitely, it's a really weird question that you asked, because again, so me and Ash and Paul, we've been working together on the Winners Club, which for those people who don't know, it's a community we've built. We've got the largest group of entrepreneurs and business owners in Europe on Clubhouse. We've got a lot of other sort of people who come in, like yourselves in the States. We've got a lot of listeners in America, got a lot of listeners in Canada. We've got a lot of listeners in Australia, a lot of African countries tune in. And we were doing some stats the other day. We get 115,000 listeners a month. It's a lot of people, 115,000 listeners a month. We do 2.5 million minutes of listen time every single month across all those people. The average person tunes in for 30 minutes. Wow. If they come and they listen for 30 minutes. The average for broadcast like radio is about 7 minutes. So we're about 6.5 times more effective than other broadcast mediums. And that 2.5 million minutes turns into 40,000 hours of listen time from 110,000 people. That's huge numbers.
Huge.
And we've been doing this for 18 months. And it was only literally last week at the time of recording that we went to Paul's house for a barbecue. It's the first social thing that we had done. And I was like, isn't that interesting? Because whereas before, I'm really pally with people, I've been staying at their house by now, we'd have gone on holiday together by now and all the rest of it. Whereas with this, I don't know whether I'm being a bit more standoffish because I've had my fingers burnt with other partnerships. But now I'm like, right, it's a business first. But the weird thing is that as I say it, it doesn't change my love or respect for them as people. Like I've grown even more fond of them, like Paul, especially because like Ash, Ash is hilarious. But I don't work with Ash as much as I do with Paul because Paul and me are in this studio. We're building out this marketing agency together. I brought him in as like an advisor, and now he's kind of like a co-founder really because he's going to help. He's helping to scale it up massively. So I deal with Paul like every day, and I learn something from him every day. But I think because I've got that business first mentality, there's no gray area of like friendship being crossed because it's always like, well, I'll tell you what I think to your face because you're my business partner first and you're my pal rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I think that's the statement we were all looking for. At least with me, you don't hold anything back with a business partner in the beginning, as where a friendship, you're never going to tell the friend the truth, but you're going to tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, or what they want to hear, not what they need to hear.
Mm.
And that's where I think friendships and business friendships are completely opposite.
Yeah, and there's also when you start something with your mates, from the experience that I've had of doing it, because the lines are never drawn to start with, no one really knows who's doing, not who's doing what, but who's in charge. Like no one can like make a funnel. So I used to have a business partnership with a pair of twin brothers. And I was like, well, this is going to be interesting. So we made a rule at the beginning because there was 3 of us. I was like, well, we'll always go with the majority rules. And everyone was mad, thought I was mad. They're like, but surely they're just going to always agree with each other, aren't they? And now vote you. I was like, no, it's normally me and one of the others because the other 2 hated each other most of the time. But that dynamic was really interesting because, like I say, sometimes people can, exactly as you said, they want to hear something, but they need to hear something different. And that's harder to tell a mate or a family member than it is a straight business partner. I think from my experience, and again, I've definitely got a skewed view on it since having my fingers burned. And I left a business partnership, and it was me who decided to leave. So they probably don't think too highly of me either, frankly.
Right. Yeah, you just recently did a podcast with Ashley, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, you said something in there when I listened to that. What was it? When you speak, you teach.
Yeah.
That's one of the best lines I've heard in a long time. And a lot of people don't understand that because speaking with a purpose and speaking out of your ass are 2 different things. And that's what that's what I thrive to do. I try to speak with a purpose, and if I don't know, I'm going to direct you into somewhere that somebody does know. I don't want to lead you on to something that's going to cause, hurtfelt or, disconfusion or however it's going to be.
Yeah, and I think that's another one of the powers of podcasting. That's probably why you're enjoying the podcast and the YouTube and that kind of journey so much, because every time you do, it doesn't matter how much of an expert you are. Every time I talk about podcasts, or I give I've got about 300 or 400 people tuning in tomorrow night for an hour long, sort of lesson on branding. But every time I'm telling it to other people, like, here's what I learned from working with BMW and Nissan and all these massive companies. Every time I'm saying this stuff, because it's often quite repetitive, but I'm just teaching it back to myself time and time and time again. At the moment, for example, I just had a call downstairs with a new client, and they're like, "Oh, what's one of the top tips you could give to me?" I said, "Well, batch record some content to start with and get ahead." I said, "Because if you're always chasing your tail week to week, it gets like big high pressure." And the guys in my office are laughing in the background. There's 3 of them who could hear the conversation, who started laughing. And I sort of looked up at them. I said, "I don't do this myself, by the way. So I'm just got to be honest with you. I'm telling you that's the easiest way to do it." I said, "But the lads are listening in the background and laughing their heads off because we did a podcast today that had to go out today and it got finished at 8:10 this morning." So do as I do, not as I do as I
Right.
say, not as I do in this instance.
Yeah.
But again, the more I say it, the more I'm like, right, I need the structure. I need the strategy. We've got, I know some of the clients that we're working with will take their podcast or their YouTube video and we turn, let's say, for example, we're recording, we focus on the video. So we record the video and that turns into YouTube. Then we'll take the audio out of it, we turn that into a podcast. We take the podcast, we transcribe that and we turn it into a blog. We take the blog and we put that onto their website. Take it from their website and we put it onto Medium. Put it onto Medium, then we take it onto LinkedIn. We do it as a LinkedIn article and a LinkedIn newsletter. We'll put that onto their newsletter as well. Then we turn that video, also we turn that into 2 YouTube shorts. We turn that into 2 reels. We'll turn it into 2 posts. We'll get 2 graphics out of that. We'll then take a short form, sort of a shorter version of the LinkedIn post or the article, and we'll turn that into multiple posts across the week. We'll take the video and do like a 3 to 10 minute clip, which will then work as a standalone promotional asset on YouTube and also works on LinkedIn natively. I'm telling you, and it works like it's fantastic for organic brand building. Is mega. I'm not doing any of it myself. I'm telling every client, go, you need to do that. You need to do that. You need to do that. This is the best way to do it. And I'm still don't do it myself. So yeah, again, that's a part of the power of sort of coaching or teaching or getting to just to share your message is the fact that when you speak, you do teach.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with all that. The biggest thing I struggled with, I mean, I don't really struggle with it, but a lot of friends of mine talk about, hey, when you got started in any one of your businesses, how do you start with a brand? How do you start with what is a brand? What is a brand to you, and how do you build a brand? That's what a lot of people struggle with. Well, my personal aspects of a brand is your idea and your mentality of that business. Now you have to turn that into something that everybody else understands. And that's what your brand is.
I always say, and you probably, if you've been on Clubhouse, well, if you're on Clubhouse more than like 5 minutes, if I'm talking, I'm normally saying this because I so strongly believe in it. Your brand is your reputation, nothing more and nothing else. I think a lot of people think it's like a website. It's your color palette. It's your social media. It's your business cards. It's, the customer experience. It's the logo on your shirt. It's the actual bricks and mortar store when you walk in. It's none of those things. It's your reputation. Your brand is your reputation, nothing more, nothing less. If your listeners get nothing else from this podcast, and they quite likely won't, but if they get nothing else from it, then hopefully that's super valuable. And the first step therein is, and this sounds a bit facetious, but what do you want your brand to be? What do you want that reputation to be? What do you want to stand for? There's some elements to it. So like core values, USPs, mission statement, value proposition, ideal buyer. When I do brand consultancy, I take people through all those steps and I don't let them move forwards until they got a real concrete answer of that stuff. But essentially, what do you want to be known for? Is it, is it that you're cheap? Are you expensive? Are you fast? Are you slow? Is it, takes ages to create the product and that's why it's so good? Or is it quick and that's why it's so good? You got to look at the elements that add up to our brand reputation. What do you want that reputation to stand for? So for example, like as an agency, our sort of tagline or our strapline or our mission statement, I guess, is we help entrepreneurs and business owners to explode their brand utilizing the power of content. That's the USP. That's the mantra. That's what we're here to do. But everything else about it, then I'd look at a USP, for example, and go, right, okay, well, what's our USP? Well, we are a podcast agency run by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. Okay, that's kind of cool, but it's not really a completely USP. It's not a complete unique selling point. It's a selling point, but it's not entirely unique. Okay, well, we've launched 159 podcasts. So that's more than anyone else in Europe has launched. Oh, that's unique. But like, what else? I'm a former failed broadcaster. Well, that's useful because I know I've been on both sides of the microphone. Obviously, you have to be careful how you spin that. Like, hey, I was a failure over there, and that's why I'm fantastic over here. But essentially, I've been on both sides of the microphone. I know how to tell stories for brands. I've also, a lot of people will talk about, brands or creating a brand will generate income, and they don't know how to turn a pound. But I've launched a podcast that made £1 million coaching business. So I've done that as well. So it's all these things that come together that would go into the brand of me effectively. But exactly as you said, that's all like that personal element, the stuff that you want to stand for, the stuff that you want to say, and making it about you in the first instance. I think that's really powerful for creating a brand. Because again, people think that it's just a logo. I still get that all the time. Oh, what do you want your brand to represent? Oh, I'm not really bothered about that kind of stuff. I just want a nice logo. I'm like, well, we've already lost before we've begun here, haven't we?
Yeah, the logo doesn't make any difference.
No.
The logo is what they see.
Yeah.
And that's it. You know, it's just
Yeah.
us as people on this planet, we only have two things. We have our name and our reputation. If you lose one of them, you lose both.
Yeah. 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 Very true. I've never heard it put like that, but that's very, very true.
So it's just one of those things. And that's what, I always try to teach some of these new kids coming in that, everybody thinks that they're going to be, they're going to start this business and it's going to be $1 million business tomorrow. And it doesn't work that way unless it's crypto. If you put 20 bucks in
Yeah.
crypto and it makes £1 million, great.
Yeah.
You got lucky. Business
Yeah.
is a marriage that you can never quit. I mean, you have to work through it. You have to learn how it grows. You have to pick apart the things you like, the things you don't like, and you have to deal with the things you don't like, and you have to enjoy the things you do like. And it's just one of those processes that we all go through in a business. I mean, slow and steady wins the race. I don't know how many times I have to say this to people. And if you build your brand off your task management, in other words, if you do your 3 small tasks a day, you're gonna grow. I mean, that's 900 tasks in a year. How much shit can you get done with 900 tasks in a year? A
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
It's very simple. Small steps and grow it as you go. And that's if you want everything right now, you're gonna lose it.
That's it, and you're absolutely right. But that's not the quick fix, instant gratification world that we live in right now, where everyone wants to. Like I say, crypto is a great example. We interviewed a guy recently, so we've got quite a big crypto podcast. We've got our own sort of various Web3 projects that we're involved in. And the guy bought a Bored Ape for $350, and 2 years later, is worth $250,000.
Right.
But even still, he'd been all of his expertise for the prior like 5-10 years of his career had led to that point. So yes, this is the other thing. A lot of people see like an overnight success, but they don't see what took that point. Yeah, it might blow up overnight. You got a lot on TikTok. Sort of just become like TikTok famous out of nowhere, and they're getting these brand endorsement deals. But they've been making content for years and years and years. There's a guy called Joe Wicks over here in the UK. He's called the Body Coach. He's probably got the biggest personal brand when we talk about brands here. So biggest personal brand in the fitness space, and he's got like a BBC. He's done loads of documentaries. He did a lot of like during lockdown over here. They call it PE, so physical education PE with Joe was like a daily show that got put out that he did off his own back on YouTube. But he's a multi-millionaire now. Brand endorsements come out of his eyeballs, worth a fortune. Seems like a good lad. I know quite a lot of people who know him, and they say he's a really good dude. But he was making YouTubes 7 years before anyone got, and he said this in a podcast interview. So I was making YouTube videos 7 years before anyone gave a shit about YouTube. He's like, and I was there week in, week out, consistent as hell. He said, you can go back and you can look at them and you can watch the evolution almost of his circumstances, because it's like him in a back bedroom, him in a front bedroom, him in a PT center, him in a private gym, him in a home gym, him in a really fancy home gym. Like you can see the evolution. But again, it's been over 7 years. So when people are like, it's like when a plumber turns up to your house and they're like, oh, there's something wrong with my radiator. And they can go in and can go, okay, problem solved. That's $300, please. Like $300 for that. No, you're not paying for the twist of the screw. You're paying me for the 10 years that it took to learn which screw to turn to stop the water coming out the pipes. Exactly. That's what you paid for. And I think that sort of consistent combined, what do you call it? Compound interest on knowledge is exactly the same in business. And that's the reason, like now when you're talking about the YouTube stuff and the podcast stuff, you don't like this bit, you don't like that bit, and you had the 2 cameras out in the sun the other day, you're doing the feds and it's 100 degrees and the cameras kept melting after 40 minutes and all the rest of it. When you look back in 5 years' time, when you're still only 58, when you've still only been retired for 5 years, and then you've got a big content hub, you were like, oh, remember before I had a team? Do you remember before I had someone managing all this stuff for me? Do you remember when I was just doing this shit on my own? When I had a random podcast with some guy from Britain, like talking about content. Like you look back and laugh on it in those years to come. You really will.
Oh yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, the funny thing about it is me as a person, I sell anything that I've ever owned in a way that I don't care if you buy it. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to give you a quality product if you do. And the aspect of me not caring makes people buy it more.
Mm.
And then when they do buy it, the product they're getting is far superior than anything they've ever bought before. And
Yeah.
that's what I like to breed, and that's what I like to instill in anything that I do.
What is it you're making? I'm intrigued now. And what have you recently retired from?
I had a insurance claims company.
Okay.
So we did so if you had a damage, you have tornadoes or hailstorm or something, and the insurance claims guy comes out and gives you an estimate on your house, that's what we did.
Okay.
So we had 75 adjusters running around the United States doing estimates all year round.
Right. So what are you doing now? You talk about like building stuff and the wood shop, and was that always just like a hobby that you're now sort of turning into
Yeah, I
like
mean,
a
I grew up on the farm, so we always built things as kids, and I just always loved, you know, building stuff. I mean, stuff like that. Just building stupid crap. Build chairs, build tables. Like those river tables with epoxy. I built a bunch of those.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
Built the shed. I'm building out all the my YouTube content right now is building out my shop. So I
Okay.
start in one corner and I'm building out the tool section right now. That's what I'm filming.
Oh, very cool.
And then when I get done with that, I'm gonna build out my chop saw station. And then when I get done with that, I'm gonna build out my 3 work tables that I've already got framed, but they're just basically tables with nothing underneath them. So now I'm gonna build out
Right.
all the cabinetry and all that, and then I'm just gonna move all the way around. Then I'm gonna build out the
That would be
podcast
such a good name
studio.
for a brand. Building stupid crap. I love that. Building stupid crap with Doug.
It is. That's kind of what it is. It's just.
I love it.
I mean, I mean, I got. I branded myself as the wood shop yoga.
Right, sure.
I can straighten
Okay.
anything.
I like it. I
So
like it.
that's kind of where I'm at, and that's what. I don't know. It's a lot of fun. It's completely new and out of the box for me. When I can't say attended college, but when I went to college, um, I was in broadcast. I was a broadcasting major with a hotel management degree, and I did the DJ thing for 2 semesters. Well, 1 and 3/4 because I didn't make it through the end of the second semester because I drank myself out of it. And then so I really liked that aspect of it, and now here we are, 25 years later. I'm getting back into that broadcasting part to where it just fascinates me. That's why I was drawn to you with the brand. And you're a brand ambassador, and you try to make people understand how to grow these things in this, or like you just said, you named 5 different avenues of rebranding that I didn't even understand. So you're talking about taking this one loop that we're doing right now and then breaking it down to 5 different or 6 different other avenues. I never even thought of that.
We all have our skills,
I'm
Doug.
doing all kinds of different social media aspects, like TikTok and Reels and the YouTube Shorts. I'm not really getting into. I'd probably make a totally separate channel because YouTube Shorts don't generate into long-term aspects, I don't think.
No, the hack, and you've touched on something there, which I'll quickly just jump on top of. Sorry to talk over you, but yeah, that's how we're using Shorts. Run it as a completely separate channel and drive the traffic back to the main one. So you just have like like Doug's Digs or whatever, like cuts of or of like little clips and snippets, and then push to the main content. Because even on a YouTube feed, and I'm definitely not a YouTube expert, by the way, and this will change, and the algorithm will change, and the way it's laid out will change, and all that kind of stuff. But even as it gets laid out at the moment, if you've got the main videos, they're that way around, and then you have the reels, which are that way around, or the shorts.
Yeah.
It just looks a mess on your page. So a lot of people are using the shorts as a channel of their own, and then driving that to the main to push to the main traffic of your main page.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. But if you're doing reels anyway, with a few very minor tweaks and adjustments. Because again, a lot of these platforms, TikTok, Snapchat, Reels on Facebook, Reels on Insta, they're all designed to shorts on YouTube. They're all the same ratio sizes intentionally so that you can multi-purpose it. And basically Facebook, you look at the top of your Facebook feed on your phone now, it's like they've stolen TikTok. And that's what the platforms do. They'll just like mug each other off. You go, that's working. We'll just copy it.
And that's where I struggle with, because I'm like I said, I like the quality content. So I don't want to go over a minute, because if anybody else is like me, I lose attention span after a minute. And it's just one of those things where I got to fit so much into a minute. So I spend so much time thinking through it on how it's going to go in that minute. And then I practice it 20 times to get it into the right section. And then before I know it, I spent 4 hours on a 1 minute fucking reel. And that's just, it's not good for me.
That's where you need to start repurposing the content. So you're making and you're already doing the hard stuff, right? The long form, like this podcast, that's the hard bit. That's the bit that most people won't do. Most people could try and find time to make a 1 minute clip. Most people would find time to make, to try and get like a quote graphic or a little tiny 1 minute piece of content. That's fine. But we've been on a call on and off for 90 minutes. So actually out of that 90 minutes, you've already done the hard yards. Now you just need to repurpose the asset, sweat the asset, as I say. So get the video, get the audio, to transcribe it into a blog. Blog becomes an article. Article goes into the newsletter. Newsletter becomes your mailing list. Your mailing list then feeds what Brendan Burchard calls circular virality. So everything's pointing to something else. So when we do a content strategy for a client, we will look at like, where are we posting? But not only that, where are we posting, but where are we pointing that post to? So that YouTube, that's going to bounce to that carousel. That carousel goes to that LinkedIn post. That LinkedIn post is going to go to the podcast. The podcast is going to bounce out to YouTube. YouTube's going to go to the shorts. The shorts going to go back to the main feed. So it's almost this like multi-dimensional intertwining of everything, which sounds well wafty, but actually when you've done it a few times, it's actually not that complicated to do. It just needs structure. That's a kit, and probably as a way of wrapping this up, because I've realized we've just chewed people's ears off for an hour and a half. But structure around your content is absolutely imperative. It's super, super key. And structure around your brand, not just your content. What are you putting out on, what's your content plan? It's all well and good doing a podcast, but when are you going to do a promo clip to drive people to it? When are you going to put out a quote from the guest? When are you going to put out a video from the guest? When are you going to put out the transcript? When you do a blog? And having an understanding of that stuff, even if you just use like Google Calendar and just block off, right, on certain days I've got to do this kind of stuff, and then allocate yourself. Maybe you're in a more fortunate position than most because of being retired, because of the position you got yourself to in life. You can take a bit more time to do this kind of stuff. If you said, right, half of a day, like one afternoon per week, I got to write my content for the following week or the week after, then you'll have a really, really good content structure, and consistent content as well. But most people, myself included, get themselves so busy that they've never got the time to invest that half day to make the rest of their week or their fortnight that much easier. And that's where I think most people need to get to, if they can.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, is just keeping all the content straight. So I learned that early on. You just can't keep recording on your SD cards and just keep recording and not downloading it into files. So I learned to download those into files with names on them, so that way I can go back and get them and know where they all are, and then I can keep producing. Because now I'm getting to the point where I'm producing an hour to 2 hours of content every day.
Right.
And
that's a lot.
That's a lot. But it's great, because now I can go back and start editing it. And that's, like I said, that's the part I hated. So now I'm downloading everything that I do onto a SD card, and then sending it Dropbox to Hannah, and then she's picking it apart and putting it in the right areas. I mean, I just learned how to do a thumbnail and an intro 2 weeks ago. My first 2 podcasts just barely had a thumbnail, and that was it. Now I've got an intro to the podcast, and then I've got the thumbnail, and then I've got the end out screens, and it's a work in progress, like you said in the beginning.
100%.
And
we all are,
awesome.
mate. We all are.
One last question before we get off. So how old are you, James?
39 as of last week.
Okay, 39 years old. Is this the path you saw yourself on when you were 18?
Nah. I don't know what the path was at 18. I was what you call a hod carrier. So I was a bricklayer's laborer on building sites at 17, 18 and 19. I was the fittest I've ever been and the most miserable I've ever been in my entire life. Lugging sort of, I don't know what you even call it, hods of like 12 bricks up and down ladders. And the last job I worked on was a converted cannabis factory, which was 5 stories of ladders to get to the top. And I was working with the fastest bricklayer you've ever seen in your life. Like the guy his nickname was the Rocket. And I had to get the bricks and the concrete up to him. And every time, but the bastard, every time by the time I got to the top of the ladder, he's used up everything that I've got from before. So I would literally tear ass up and down ladders all day long. I was like, this is not the life for me. So no, this is not the path that I saw myself on. But equally, I don't know what the next week holds. I don't know what the next fortnight holds. And I kind of like that about life. I've got friends who are in jobs, they perceive it, jobs for life. You know, if anything that we've gone through in the last few years, I think that's proven that jobs for life are not a thing anymore. So I'm kind of glad of the flexibility of mindset and enthusiasm that I've got. But no, it's not the path, but I'm very pleased where I'm at. I'm very content where I'm at. I am by no means a finished article, and I don't think anybody is. I'm by no means where I perceive that I want to go in, in the end, but I'm really enjoying the journey. I've got a fantastic wife, 2 beautiful kids. We're all healthy and happy. I say happy most of the time. My wife's just phoned me. She's like, "Where's our kid's scooter?" I was like, "I left it at school." So now I'm in trouble. But other than that, she's happy. And
that's the problem with having a penis. We're always in trouble.
Exactly that. But no, it's I'm really, but to the point of like where I thought I was going to be at 18, like Clubhouse is coming along. The only reason we're doing this conversation is because of Clubhouse. Clubhouse wasn't a thing 18 months ago, 2 years ago in my world. So sometimes you've got to know where you're ultimately trying to get to. And then if stuff comes along the way, you can go, right, that adds speed to it, or that moves the boat faster, or it doesn't, and you let it go by the wayside. Clubhouse has been the most empowering, time wasting, flipping change of my life. I've spent hours and hours and hours, thousands of hours probably on that platform, growing this community, which might or might not be the best thing that we've ever done. It might end up being, if we can take that 50,000 people that we've effectively put onto Clubhouse's platform, if we can turn that into a platform that we own, we might have accidentally created the most empowering content hub for business owners and small scale entrepreneurs that's ever existed. Or it might have been a complete waste of time. Only time will tell, Doug. We'll find out soon, though.
We don't know.
We don't know yet.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, James, where, for all the listeners out there that understands what James is going after, if you have any questions about his brand, if you have any questions about how he can help you in this video content world, which I know I will be reaching out behind the scenes to talk about exactly what he just explained a couple minutes ago, and having a plan and knowing how to put that plan together. That's where one of the things that I've kind of struggled, because I don't know what the plan is for all of this. I just kind of produce, put it together, and try to be consistent in putting it out. Well, now he just introduced a new problem for me, to having a plan on a bunch of other shit. So now I got to learn some more crap, but that's what this is all about. This is about educating me and understanding all of this information. But hey, tell everybody where they can find you. Tell everybody about what you got going or what you need, and we'll probably end out on that.
Awesome stuff. So yeah, but easiest place to find me is probably through our website. So Phonic with a PH, so PHONIC. So phonic.media is the website. I'm also on Instagram as James Burtt Official. We're on Clubhouse as the Winners Club. But yeah, go to phonic.media, and if you want to get in contact, I realize I've chucked loads of ideas and strategies and tactics at people, and a lot of the time the feedback I get is like, "Oh my god, it's amazing," but it's too much. If you need a call, if you need a chat, if you're just like, what the hell were you even talking about, reach out via the contact page on the website, and we'll jump on a call. I'm sure I can help point you in the right direction, or I'll just talk about branding so much you'll go, nah, not for me, thanks. Anyway, pal, see you later. Either way, we'll get you on the straight and narrow.
Awesome. James, I appreciate everything, and it's just one of those things, just me learning every day. That's why I started this podcast. I love to interview people that make us go forward, but everybody that's tuning in to help educate me, Appreciate you following. Go out to our Patreon page, hit the subscribe button, follow us. And apparently I'm going to be introducing a few more small avenues of channels to go on, because I'm not doing that. But appreciate you, and thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me on, Doug. I appreciate it. I look forward to watching the evolution and the journey of Doug's global content takeover.
Awesome.